דברי אליי. מה את יודעת? מה את מכירה?
לא, אין תחושה ברגליים, תגידי, כאילו אין לו תחושה ברגליים מתחת לשבר, הוא אומר שהוא לא יכול להזיז.
אני מביצה כולם לפינוי. עכשיו?
It's close to midnight in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights, just a few hundred yards from the increasingly dangerous Syrian border. A team of Israeli soldiers is preparing for a special operation. It's potentially dangerous, and it's the first time they've invited journalists to witness anything like it.
כולם להיות בהאזנה, בסדר, אני מזכיר, זה לילה, השקט הוא מבורך, אתם תשמעו אותי מדבר כל הזמן. היה פה הסתובבות חריגה, בסדר, ביומיים האחרונים, בכל האזור של המרחב הזה. תפקיד שעלתה אתמול של 4 חבר'ה, אני אומר, בוודאות תצפית, עדיין לא ברור מי הם או מה הם, אוספים על זה עדיין מודיעין, אז להיות ערניים, להקשיב, מה שנקרא, לרכשים משמאל, לרכשים מימין, מה שנקרא, הערנות שלנו זה מה שיציל אותנו.
כך פחות מהדאגה.
We wait as the vehicles drive towards the border, into darkness. Five minutes later, some news over the radio.
יכולה להגיד לי משהו על המצב שלו?
פציעה בבטן ובחזה וירי מאתמול.
קיבלתי פציעה בבטן ובחזה, ירי מאתמול.
כל הפרטים המלאים יגיעו בהמשך, אנחנו כרגע מעריכים אותם.
So it's gonna be interesting.
Before long, the unit returns. The first part of their mission is a success. Only the mission probably isn't what you think. Rather than fighting their enemies, the Israelis are rescuing them. The soldiers are bringing 3 wounded Syrian fighters into Israeli territory for urgent medical care.
דברי אליי. מה את יודעת? מה את מכירה? חזה, בטן, גב, יד, רגל. מה זה, רסיסים?
לא יודעת. הסיטואציה הייתה 80 בלי חמצן.
What we're seeing here is really quite astounding. A group of Israeli soldiers treating fighters from Syria. You couldn't have imagined it happening 2 years ago, but it just goes to show how unpredictable the Middle East has become and how much this region is changing.
About a mile away in Syria, an al-Qaeda affiliate known as Jabhat al-Nusra has seized a swathe of land, and Syria's army is trying to take it back. This footage is from a bloody battle earlier in the day, most likely where the 3 rescued Syrians were wounded. Earlier in the day, we drove to a nearby lookout point in a closed military zone to get closer to the fighting.
We've come up to the Golan Heights, an area that's controlled by Israel. It's been controlled by Israel since 1967, and this is a tank left over from that period when they fought a war with Syria for control of this area. Since then, this has been the quietest border in Israel. They've only had to deal with conflict pretty much on the Lebanese side and with Gaza. That's starting to change. With the civil war in Syria raging for the last 2 years, this has suddenly become Israel's hottest border.
It's easy to hear and see the not-too-distant sound of shelling. On this day, al-Nusra forces are fighting the Syrian army for control of the main road to Damascus.
You can really see things quite clearly inside Syria from this close up. You can see the streets, you can see all of the detail of the buildings.
With binoculars, you can even see the fighters. But as is the case with Syria's deeply complicated civil war itself, it's hard to make out who the fighters are and what exactly they're fighting for. For now, they've largely left Israel alone. And Israel has tried on the surface to appear neutral. But there are new signs that Israel is siding with the rebels. United Nations observers recently reported witnessing IDF soldiers allowing what appeared to be 2 unwounded rebel fighters into Israeli territory. Still, the IDF maintains that its only interaction with rebels is in humanitarian missions like this.
So we've got the 3 casualties in there. It looks like the guy on the ground, he's in a lot of pain. The other 2 seem more or less okay, but they just might be out of it. But this right here, this is the fallout from the most violent war in the world today.
כן.
לא, אין תחושה ברגליים, תגידי, כאילו אין לו תחושה ברגליים מתחת לשבר, הוא אומר שהוא לא יכול להזיז. אני לא מצאתי שם דופק, אבל הן מאוד מתקתיות, אז אני לא יודעת.
בטן, חזה.
הוא היה לו, חוררו לך את החיים גם בסוריה. הקוטר ייכנס אליו גם הבית.
אני מסכים איתך, תני נסים לי בכף יד, כי קודם ראיתי ברית חמוד, שלי היה נראה קטן.
אני ממליצה על כולם לפינוי. אני יכולה לבקש ממנו לעשות לך מוקדם? אוקיי. אם בזה תלוי האישור.
They bring the wounded fighters to a nearby hospital. It can't be overstated what an unusual relationship this is for everyone involved. Israelis treating fighters who in some cases are bent on Israel's destruction. But since the start of Syria's civil war, about 1,300 Syrians have quietly received medical treatment inside Israel.
What's the prognosis for these guys? Are they going to survive?
I think so. They'll be okay. Maybe the guy with his legs will have a long-term treatment, but he'll be okay.
What we're seeing is a high level of coordination from the Israeli military directed towards helping these fighters from inside Syria. The question I'm asking myself is, do they have a deal with one particular faction fighting on the other side of the border? And if they do, what is Israel getting in exchange? So far we've seen, according to Israel's own statistics, that 90% of the people that they're treating have been men. So I'm going to leap to the conclusion that most of them have been fighters. I think Israel sees this as being in its overall interests, but I want to know more specifics.
جبهة النصرة يعني مو بهذيك السوء هي اللي واصلة عنها السوء، احنا يعني عايشين جبهة النصرة هناك يعني ما تتدخل انها تقتل او كذا او تظلم حدا او هذا بحارب حدا، لا هي تحارب النظام فقط لا غير.